so proud. He's going to give us some words of Torah this week.
All right, here is my interpretation of the Torah portion I just read a few Torah portions ago, and how it relates to my life. I've separated it into several acts as though it were a play, and I'm going to call this play my spiritual journey. Act 1, Introduction. Every true spiritual journey is a quest, which means that we set out to discover something. The Israelites are on a spiritual journey, a quest. They transitioned from being slaves in Egypt to entering the vast unknowns of the desert and eventually being on the cusp of the promised land of Israel. For most people, it's much easier to coast through life on the surface without ever diving beneath to see down into the dark blue depths. But if we choose to ignore that there is more to life than the daily rush and the hoarding of possessions, what happens when we come up, smack up against suffering? Act 2, Adversity. When we get ill, or someone we love leaves or dies, or when we near the end of our life, which could be at any time, what do? If we just coasted through life without ever going into the depths, we'd probably feel disoriented and lost, without any mental or spiritual resources to help us deal with suffering and adversity. Act 3, the call. Adversity leads to the call. This is the catalyst that starts us on our journey. It's the point in a person's life when they first notice that everything is going to change. We tend to refuse the call, just like the Israelites, because we know in our hearts that a spiritual journey means to face the greatest fears of all, the fear of the unknown. We tend to refuse the call because we don't want to change. One way that we commonly refuse the call is by denial. We deny whatever is difficult in our lives. We say things like, this can't be happening to me. This is how we fend off what is painful and uncomfortable. The desert is the Israelites' call. It is full of fear. However, the Israelites continue to deny the possibility of redemption and even go as far as rebelling against Moses. They say, send us back to Egypt, where at least we know where our next meal was coming from. Let us die there. Act 4, Hanani. When we reluctantly embark on our spiritual journey, we find ourselves in an uncomfortable place, darkness. Being in the desolate, lifeless desert is a wonderful metaphor for the darkness that surrounds us on our spiritual journey. To stand up in the darkness and continue our journey is to say the Hebrew word Hanani. In the Torah, there are many characters who have the ability to say this incredibly important word, Hanani. Roughly defined, it is to be truly present in the moment, to have the realization that I am here, and is mostly used when God personally calls on someone in the Bible to do something difficult and important, such as Abraham, here I am. Moses, here I am. It is very complete and emotionally charged and implies, here I am, ready, willing, and able. If it's so difficult, why should we embark on a spiritual journey at all? Well, there is no choice really. We are already on a spiritual journey. The journey is called life. We are free to refuse the call, but it's there nonetheless. We are called to realize our full potential and to become a force for good in the world. If we respond to the call, if we say Hanani, we realize that life is not an empty desert or full of suffering and tragedy. We find meaning and purpose. And that is where the spiritual quest leads us, to find that life has purpose beyond absurdity. So why am I here in front of you today? Well, first of all, I guess I could say better late than never. Or I can put it in my son Josh's words and say, Dad, are you going to be 43 when you become a Bar MitVah? As to which I responded, yes, Josh, why do you ask? And then he responded, because you're only 30 years late, and that's a nice even number. Speaking of numbers, the portion of the Torah I just read came from the book of Numbers, which of course is convenient, or a coincidence, or shall I say beshert, as to the fact that my professional life as a money manager, I deal with numbers all day long. But it is also convenient that the portion I have just read was titled Bar MitVah, translated loosely as the desert or the wilderness, or as I have stated previously, the darkness that has surrounded us on our spiritual journey. Looking back at my life, I too have been placed in the MitVah several times and had my challenges throughout life. My spiritual journey began when I was 7 years old and was told my parents were getting divorced and that my dad was moving to Israel. Well, at that time, my mom and my Aunt Beth took on the role of raising 3 boys as both mom and dad. And that's when I took the role of dad onto my 2 brothers. We didn't know any other way, so that was our normal. And because of the constant love we got from each of them and each other, we thrived as youngsters, and although we lived in multiple houses and went to multiple schools and had to remake multiple friends, it shaped us to be the people that we are today. Being Jewish was always a part of my childhood, even though most of our friends were not Jewish. This was mainly because my mom and my aunt and the rest of my family felt it was important to celebrate being Jewish and celebrate all the holidays together. However, when it came time for me to go to Hebrew school and go through the traditional rites of passage as a 13-year-old boy does and become a Bar Mitzvah, we didn't have the money to pay for the Jewish education. And unfortunately, the local temple at the time was not willing to bend those rules. However, in my adult life, I understand that this is very uncommon in the Jewish community, and most temples, of course Temple Beth Shalom, will help make that rite of passage even happen if there was even monetary difficulties. As we all know, it's a mitzvah anyway. Moving on through my adult life, I've been fortunate to marry into a family where my father-in-law Harold and my mother-in-law Tina have kept Judaism alive by continuing to honor the holidays and celebrations and inviting me to join them at their temple for all the high holy days, which I especially enjoyed when it was just myself and my father-in-law Harold. Recently, I have entered another MitVah of sorts and have found myself leaving JP Morgan after 12 years and going into private practice, which in itself creates many challenges that not only have affected me, but have affected my family as well. But it's because of my amazing family, especially my wife Shari, and all of her support, that has allowed me to continue this transition, which I know will be another amazing journey for me. So now it's my turn to keep Judaism alive for my family, and to pass the traditions down to my children. Well, what better way to start than to show them that I am as committed as I want them to be by becoming involved in our temple, Beth Shalom. Not just by being a member, but by being an active member. As I started to become involved with the temple and the different committees and really got to know Rabbi Lykin and Cantor Anna, I formed an amazing bond with them and started to form bonds with many of the congregants as well, which led me to become one of the vice presidents of the temple that I currently am. The more time I spend here and the more relationships I start to form with the temple's congregants and clergy, I knew that this place had a special calling to me, and I needed to take my spiritual journey to the next level, which brought me to join the Adult B'nai Mitzvah program and be up here in front of you today. I also have to mention my 2 teaching assistants, my children Josh and Madison, who sat on the bed with me many nights and helped me study Hebrew, or should I say, correct me every time I got a letter or a word wrong. And of course my wife Shari, who has been right by my side, supporting me in every part of my journey, as well as telling me I sound good when I'm chanting the Torah, knowing very well that our dog's barking is more relaxing than hearing me chanting. I'm so grateful to not only have all of you here in attendance today, but to have all my family here as well. They flew in from all over the country to share this joyous occasion with me, and also Aaron Kenny, who is sharing the bima with me today and who will do a phenomenal job tomorrow as he did tonight when he becomes a bar mitzvah as well. Thanks for letting me share this little piece of my spiritual journey with you tonight.